Welcome back to the show, everyone. I've got to kick us off with a rather damning quote from WB Games leadership. Here it is. Suicide Squad has, quote, fallen short of our expectations. Yeah, that may not be the biggest surprise. Of course, it's no secret that the big decision makers behind game studios have been making bad calls that have been wasting developers' time. That's how we ended up getting Suicide Squad. Hopefully, management is learning that lesson, though. We'll dive into that story, but elsewhere in the industry, the talent that made Disco Elysium have now been fully wasted by their corporate overlords, and of all publishers, it is Gearbox that may be a bit of an exception because they're experimenting with the removal of live service parts of a game. It'll be interesting to see if that works. The good news, though, is you don't have to experiment for good results. We've got them for you with today's sponsor, who are going to help us save some money. Recently, I found out that I was subscribed to 2 video editing tools that do the same thing, and a streaming service that I don't use, which kind of sucked. Thankfully, Rocket Money is here to help us. It's a personal finance tool that helps you lower your bills, stay on top of subscriptions, and manage your money. And you can get started for free today at rocketmoney.com/Bellular. Now, with subscriptions, Rocket Money will securely and safely identify recurring charges for you, and once it's done that, well, you can just cancel them in a single tap. Like, it doesn't tell you to go and cancel them, it just gives you a button. You can click it and they get cancelled, which is pretty damn crazy. So if that's been on your to-do list, well, Rocket Money can fix that for you today. What about your bills? Do you want them to be lower but also don't want to spend half your life listening to hold music on a phone line? Well, you can upload your bills to Rocket Money and have them negotiate for you, which is a killer time saver. They do more as well, like they help you budget, and so far, they've saved their customers an average of $740 a year, cancelling over $500 million of subscriptions. So, you can save more and spend less, joining over 5 million members using Rocket Money today by going to rocketmoney.com/Bellular or clicking the link in the description to get started for free. You can then unlock more features with premium, and that's rocketmoney.com/Bellular to get started for free. Okay, WB Games. So, their chief financial officer, Gunnar Wiedenfels, had some rather harsh words for their games division on a recent earnings call, and obviously the ire was being directed at Suicide Squad. So here goes. He explained to investors and analysts that we are lapping the release of Hogwarts Legacy in February, which saw the largest portion of its very positive financial impact in the first quarter. He went on, though, to say that this year's Suicide Squad was one of their key game releases and that it has fallen short of expectations since its release earlier in this quarter, and he says that's going to be setting up their games business for tough year-over-year competition in Q1. Obviously, I mean, come on, your Q1 contenders are Hogwarts Legacy versus Suicide Squad, and that makes complete sense to all of us. I mean, usually when a game gets good numbers, we see announcements. Have we seen an announcement saying, 1 million copies sold? No, we have not seen that, and the reviews speak for themselves. This is a game sold only to the more hardcore fans, I guess, who are already super invested in it. It wasn't a widespread hit. Its reviews were pretty terrible. Now, there was a little core of an audience who were interested in it. They basically tried to kind of like weaponize that in their marketing beats, like coming up to launch, but obviously that didn't end up working. So, yeah, to think about what he said a little bit more closely then, he's talking about comparing Suicide Squad with Hogwarts Legacy and finding it wanting, and basically that means that the games division is facing financial problems. Now, the context here is kind of interesting. This would mean, right, that not only were Warner Brothers expecting Suicide Squad to do well, which, I mean, if you're just kind of outside of their games division, as, say, a CFO, you may think, oh, Hogwarts, yeah, that'll be big. Suicide Squad, oh yeah, big live service, amazing, that'll do big. You might be thinking that kind of thing. They were expecting it to match and then surpass the best-selling game of last year. To which you gotta say, sorry chaps, that's absolutely bloody insane. I mean, that is so absurd that you've really got to wonder if it's almost a pretext, right? A pretext to layoffs from the many teams under WB Gaming, because they have, failed to meet expectations as a group, of course, in spite of the company's strategy being absolutely unachievable, because there's no way that Suicide Squad, even if it did well, would compete with Hogwarts Legacy. So yeah, I just have to wonder if this is basically a pretext that, that they can say this, then announce layoffs and be like, oh, look, shareholders, we didn't meet our expectations and now we've been fiscally responsible. Aren't we great? Yeah. So then where does that leave us with the game? So if you go to Steam, you can see the user ratings, and to be honest, like, they are weird. Now, I know a lot of people were talking about kind of like inconsistencies with reviews. Now, I'm sure that if there were reviews that were breaching the Steam like terms of service, that those will have been deleted. So let's just talk about Steam review management. Of course, we've published a game on Steam. I think we're north of like 1,200 reviews now, I believe. So what I can say is, number one, if you see screenshots with different numbers of reviews, that can actually be different depending on somebody's language settings on Steam. So right now, I think mine is just default to English. You can see for my language, just shy of 5,000. For all languages, though, like 6,700. So if you had a filter that was, say, only to German, you would be seeing a far smaller number of reviews if you saw a screenshot there. So it's that weird thing, like on launch day, we were F5ing this page and we did not see, at least per our filters, which were consistent throughout that day, we weren't seeing anything to the tune of like hundreds of reviews being deleted in between us refreshing that page. Obviously, I cannot authoritatively say either way. What I will say is, like, for my own personal preferences playing video games, I know that I would be in the red here for this game. I would certainly not be in the blue. So, not defending it, don't have a horse in this race, but no matter what's really going on with the reviews, the player count's the thing that matters. And look, guys, the player counts are pretty damn dismal. That's what we'll be facing Rocksteady and Warner Bros. And to be honest, like, yeah, is technically the right thing to do to put lots of resources in and to make this the best game and to win people back. Like, yeah, you could make that argument. I think loads of us, though, are going to look at this and think, what are you doing? This doesn't make sense. You're not going to get your money back. Why bother? So that's the sort of challenging thing. I suppose a scenario where they are forced to like acknowledge the difference between a successful live service and a successful regular game, that's like fairly interesting. I don't know. I don't think they're going to make their investment back here. I think that this game was a fairly large mistake. And if they do put a lot of money into this, yeah, there is a chance they will win people back and have a successful live service. I don't think that's a very big chance. I don't think that putting money in that chance would be a sensible thing, really. And that now means that Warner Bros., they are saddled with a live service that they've made commitments, I believe, for a whole year of content to. So what are they going to do? On the big picture, they've got continuing work on Mortal Kombat 1, there's an upcoming Quidditch game, and more titles as well. The question is, will they learn their lesson? We know that they have wanted more live games. I could imagine the Quidditch game actually suiting a live format, like naturally quite a bit better than this game. I mean, whole discussion we had in and around Helldivers 2. It's like the narrative design of Helldivers 2, the vibe of the world, everything is actually designed to be a live service game first. And in that video, when I was talking about like how so many live service games feel like they're not really designed that way, well, this is the game I'm talking about. I mean, so is Anthem, so is the Avengers, but it's that weird thing where, congratulations, you've managed to make both a bad regular action video game and also a bad live service. You've tried to do both, and it's just blown up in your face. Ultimately, I think the sad thing here is, fans who wanted more, they have obviously lost out. People who love the Arkham games, they have lost out. And for the game developers involved, they've also lost out. So many of them have put years of time into this project, and you can see that lots of amazing work has been done on it. Like some of the facial animations, you literally have people saying that those facial animations are some of the best in gaming. So there's no doubt that those people were passionate, that they gave a shit, that they really tried. The problem is, though, fundamentally, well, what if you were just barking up the wrong tree the entire time? Yeah, it's just one of those situations. It's not how hard you row, it's what boat you're in, and this boat was never going anywhere good, in my personal opinion. Now, as for a group that you may think have learned absolutely nothing, though, well, could be the people running ZA/UM. Bit of an odd name for a studio, but it is the studio behind the absolute hit, critically acclaimed game, Disco Elysium. And oh boy, has Disco Elysium had drama. So following on from our previous coverage, there's a new update on the status of the studio and what the hell's been going on. It's been insane. I mean, everyone who worked on writing Disco Elysium is gone from the company. A standalone expansion to Disco Elysium has been cancelled, which, that kind of sucks. More disco would be sweet. And I'm just going to first give you a minor recap of the story so far. So, after 3 big-name creatives on the project, and I'm going to mangle names, try not to, but Hindper, I think, Rostov and Kurvitz. So they were pushed out in 2022 amid allegations of abusive behavior, and those allegations were partially corroborated by the investigations of GI.biz and their sources, but there was also counter allegations of corporate malfeasance and fraud from those individuals. They're like, the big three creatives. It was a pretty crazy situation. Much of this was corroborated by the available information and also in interviews by an amazing documentary from a fantastic crew who run the channel People Make Games. They do amazing work. I definitely think you should check them out. And they did a big look into this game earlier this year. Now, what's worth noting here is that each of these two stories, they don't really preclude the other one from being true, right? So those original creatives could have been toxic assholes, and the business people could have had, a bunch of lies, untruths, corporate malfeasance, etc. And if both are true, you essentially have a situation where the work environment is becoming toxic because of the behavior of those individuals, and then at the same time, the company was apparently being defrauded and taken over. Of course, you could say that there would be feedback loops where maybe the toxic behavior would make the corporate people, do shifty moves. Maybe the shifty moves of the corporate people would stress out those original creatives, and that could maybe make for an even more toxic work environment. I mean, man, whatever it is, it does seem like a shit show. Now, in this case, two groups of shareholders or / management are continuing to come into conflict, and while that's happening, well, the poor bastards who just work at the studio, they're just kind of left trying to muddle along. So here is where things lay after all that stuff. Number one, some of the original members of the ZAUM collective who had worked on the original tabletop game that actually spawned Disco Elysium and had wrote significant parts of the game, they were still at the company. Remember though, some of the original members. Point number two, the big name creatives had been pushed out, and they then found a deal with NetEase, of all people, to make a new game, and that was happening while they were attempting to legally challenge everything going on with ZAUM. Point three then is an original key creative and corporate influence, Kaur Kender, had entirely removed himself from the picture. And then the fourth point is the new corporate owners of ZAUM had seemingly seen off legal challenges to the methods by which they acquired the company, right? So they saw those off, and they were then trying to basically turn the studio into a narrative games powerhouse, which, come on, looking at Disco Elysium, it seems like that's what should have happened. But obviously, the whole thing turned out to be a big shit show. Now, though, what has happened is the last remaining creatives from the original ZAUM are gone, firmly making this a Ship of Theseus situation. Now, this was identified by GLHF and then corroborated in follow-up interviews where the management at ZAUM basically cancelled a suite of projects, including a Disco Elysium standalone expansion that was led by the last original member of ZAUM, Argo. So they killed that, and they're arranging layoffs for just under a third of the company, and those layoffs have since been confirmed by the company. Now, that project was codenamed X7, and it would have been a standalone Disco Elysium expansion. Sources at the studio have cited a hostile attitude from management in general, but specifically one targeted at women, while the teams working on the projects in the company would basically just, they'd be crunching all the time, and they'd be crunching right into cancellations, which, doesn't really sound like a good place to work. Now, in a final word to GLHF, Argo explicitly asked the audience to remember who is at fault and to act accordingly. So here's the statement. The fish starts rotting from the head, not the tail or the midsection. Don't get angry at the junior producer, mid-level lead, senior artist, community manager. They didn't know. They were kept in the dark. It's not their fault. It was their love of disco, not dystopian totalitarianism, that brought them here. It's their worst nightmare too. So that is a lesson here. I think it's also a lesson that we can apply, though, to so many other games and studios. That's what it's like with, say, I'll pick a dramatic dramatic game, Overwatch 2. It's not the community manager's fault. It's not the senior artist's fault. Actually, lately on our normally Warcraft stream, we just went into a bit of a topic with Overwatch where somebody who used to work in the Overwatch team, they were praising the work of their colleagues on the latest PvE event that comes along with, the Season 9. And the thing is, the tweet ended by, they were all laid off. So it's just one of those things. The shitty things that follow so many of our games, they're not the fault of a team lead or a senior artist or a community manager. It is the people a few rungs above them on the ladder who are actually doing the bad shit, or at least making decisions that to us feel inexplicable and rather, harming. Next though, still a baffling story. Not really baffling the way you would expect, and that is that Gearbox are bringing back a free-to-play live service as a full premium game. I did not remember Gigantic. I'm sure you didn't either, but it's a cartoon-styled MOBA hero shooter. It released in 2014 at the height of that craze. It fully launched in 2017, and then it just faded away and was closed in 2018. But now Gearbox have actually resurrected the game. Now this is coming after it was revived for a limited time throwback event that, pretty clearly seems to be a sort of, interest test that happened in October 2023. But the notable thing here is they've completely reworked the game in its mechanics, in its progression. They've added new characters, added new maps, they've added crossplay, and it's moved from being free to being $20 with no microtransactions. That's interesting. We're in an era, I suppose, where even Gearbox's future is kind of uncertain under Embracer Group. As you guys know, it's been a major part of Layoff Watch 2024 has just been Embracer Group had a deal with Savvy Games Group, who are, is it Saudi funds? Anyway, that's where the money's coming from. And this deal, it was like worth, $1 billion or something like that. And, poof. The deal goes away. It literally goes away the night before the earnings call, which certainly did mean that, Big Lars looked pretty awkward in the earnings call. But anyway, that funding falling through, so much stuff is predicated on that funding, and that's why they've basically had to do deep cuts. Anyway, they own Gearbox. Gearbox is obviously pretty big, pretty expensive, and you would worry given the very cost-cutting sort of nature of Embracer Group right now. But anyway, yeah, that's what they've done. A $20 no microtransaction game, which is the sort of thing that we would like to see. I suppose it's probably being done in a way where they're not going to have a massive commitment in the future. It's like saying, $20, there it is, go have fun. Maybe that just gets them some money. You and your mates can buy that game, actually just have fun with it, and perhaps not suffer from the myriad downsides of it being a free-to-play game. Now, the funny thing, in a way it's kind of grim, but basically the original dev was closed, right? So the original dev, Motika, they went, obviously the IP was, still with Gearbox, so Gearbox gave that to Abstraction Games, and seemingly, along with some free reign to revamp it, and there you go, it's actually happening. Now, Polygon captured this, and apparently there is actually support for this revival from the original creators of the game, right? So here's what Christopher Chung, the co-founder, said. I really appreciate that Gearbox Publishing and Abstraction Games have kept the core of what made Gigantic special. It's also gratifying to see they've added new heroes and a rush mode, which were initial concepts we had that we knew fans were, would go crazy for. So that's actually quite nice. We've seen other examples with Embracer Group, like say Piranha Bytes. You may not know them as much over in the States. If you're German, you'll know them though. They made Gothic. Right now, Gothic was absolutely humongous in Germany, broadly larger in the EU than it would have been in the US. Very early 2000s, 3D role-playing game, really did influence a lot in the industry. And the sad thing is, Piranha Bytes, they're being cut off from Embracer Group, which basically means you got no money, you're screwed. Now, if they could find money and, continue, that would be okay. But Embracer would retain Gothic. So the bit that felt bad there is like, okay, yeah, so the team are being yoked into the bin, but you're keeping, you kind of kept the spare parts that are useful. That's always the worry, but in this case, it does seem good that the co-founder of the original developer is happy for this. I'd imagine if you're a developer on this, it's like, yep, it went pretty badly, but maybe it's kind of nice that actually your work has survived. Really, though, what I'm interested in is how well a game like this does that just is $20 and that's it, because to me that is a really that's a compelling value. Even looking at a game like, say, Helldivers 2, imagine what Helldivers 2 would look like if it was free. Number one, goddamn, your server problems would be a lot worse, but well, from their perspective, why on earth would Helldivers 2 ever be free to play? They've literally rammed their servers while charging $40 to get in. But like, imagine how much worse Helldivers 2 would be if it had to make its money via other means because it was free to play. So I think this is just way better. Really though, what's great to me is players still get to play this game if they loved it. They don't get to deal with the bullshit of free to play. The developers still have their work out there and playable. Really, from a game preservation point of view, I just think this is fantastic. Being a free-to-play, like, if you don't make money, you're dead, nobody can play you. Here, though, well, that's not the case. Yes, the servers could be turned off, but I just think the idea of, okay, rehab your free-to-play game into one that has got good progression, maybe $20, just throw it out there to make some money and maybe just, you know, do some tools and stuff so that maybe the community can play together, be that dedicated servers, be that, you know, peer-to-peer or something like that. Now, of course, Overwatch is very much a contemporary of this game, and I just want to highlight some of what Kotaku said about this from their gameplay. I didn't get to mess around with these progression systems too much in my playtime, but seeing Gigantic Return as a premium game with customizable playstyles after Overwatch has pivoted into a grindy free-to-play game with expensive microtransactions and no progression system is intriguing to me. So yeah, big goddamn mood. They go on to say, it feels like Rampage Edition is making calculated moves to not be the game that was once its biggest competitor. In a way that just kind of shows how Overwatch 2 has fallen. Could you imagine if Overwatch 2 cost $40? Gonna say 40 because, hey, if you're not doing PvP, but imagine if it was $40. And yeah, there were still some microtransactions and stuff, but they were small and reasonable. And, you know, there was more progression within the game. Maybe people would actually enjoy it more. And maybe you wouldn't get, you know, oh wow, we got 5 trillion new MAUs in the first quarter of Overwatch. But like, maybe the people who buy it would actually stick. And maybe that would be more healthy for the goddamn game in the long run. Maybe that's a point. But hey, it's not like charging an upfront price is going to get you clemency from overpriced microtransactions. Hello, Diablo 4. Anyway, this is, to me, rather reminiscent of Naughty Dog using the fact that they're not making a live service game as a marketing point. Because this is just going to be a multiplayer game with a reasonable price point, and that's it. Whereas with Naughty Dog, they basically said, if we do this multiplayer thing, yeah, tough shit. The only way we can do it is a full live service that will take up most of the studio's time. And, you know, fair enough. I'd rather Naughty Dog make single-player stuff. Do you know what I'd rather even more? What if they just made The Last of Us multiplayer, charged like $30 or $40 for it or something, or maybe bundled it or something like that, and that was it. It was just a fun thing you could do. What if it didn't have to be a live service? Then maybe the people who really enjoyed that multiplayer experience from Last of Us Part 1 actually would have got what they want. But no, they're not going to get what they want, because apparently for the likes of Sony, the only thing that, you know, multiplayer that's good is full live service. And yeah, that's worked out awesome for Arrowhead, but with Naughty Dog, I mean, why could we just not have the small version that's not a live service, but is multiplayer so we can have fun with our friends? No, apparently the games industry is not that interested in doing so. Unless you're Gearbox, so honestly, props to them. I'd like to know what other games have you maybe played that are like live service where you'd actually be interested in just maybe paying $20 and just having, you know, the non-live service version you can go and play. I'd like to know what you think. Anyway, that's it for me. I've rambled on long enough. Hope you found today's stories to be interesting. Thank you very much for watching. Big thanks to today's sponsors, and I'll see you next time.